For our next session, I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Bruce McCandliss, who will share with us another example of an innovative local partnership in education. Dr. McCandliss is a professor at the Graduate School of Education here at Stanford and also directs the Educational Neuroscience Initiative here at Stanford, working in close collaboration with the Synapse School. Dr. McCandliss will give us a brief overview and introduction to the Synapse School, and we'll then invite other representatives from the school to continue the conversations. And as always, all speaker bios are in the program. Bruce?
Thanks, Eric. Well, this is a really transitional and exciting moment for me here at Stanford to be included and involved in the launch of this center. One of the reasons I love Stanford is that this is an incredible interdisciplinary hub that makes very bold connections across really different silos of knowledge. And that's where a lot of the Stanford kind of innovation and mojo actually comes from. We bring people who've got great knowledge in these silos, we bring them together on this campus, and they interact in all kinds of amazing ways. And this is turbocharged when a center like this comes together with a mission like it does. So this center's mission is quite inclusive and bold and really well designed to bring that kind of innovation together. So one aspect of the mission that I'm really excited about is that it's spanning early childhood, the earliest experiences that children have learning in childhood, all the way up to age 8, when these transformations are happening in early education. I have been involved with a lot of, another bold kind of connection is to bring the world of neuroscience and everything that we're learning about how the human brain architecture learns about its world, about its social relations, about the knowledge that have been passed down from one generation to the next, and how it absorbs that knowledge, transforms its knowledge through teaching in schools. This center has the ability, I'm really excited about, to potentially bridge these worlds of early education, which are all about these transformations that are happening in the brain around knowledge for reading and mathematics and self-control and self-awareness, with the world of early childhood learning, which is often about incredible diversity and change, which is occurring even before children go to school, as well as the earliest forms of our most profound human experiences of caregiving, of working with infants. I want to give you just a brief notion about how some of the insights that are coming from educational neuroscience when it comes to thinking about these themes about transformation. K through 2 education and the people that are guiding it are doing something quite phenomenal. It's a time of fundamental transformation in the human brain. Systems of the brain that are dedicated towards processing our world of language and processing our world of vision are coming together in new powerful ways as kids integrate their visual mind and their linguistic mind in this powerful new way of literacy. It unlocks tremendous potential for what children can do with their minds. Similar forms of transformation are happening within the world of mathematics, the world of self-regulation, the world of social relations. And we can study those things as they're changing from K to 2. Each of these things are also a story about the foundation for that. Those brain circuits were built through early childhood experiences. So the networks that represent our language have been, for several years now, forming and being refined and taking advantage of early education and learning opportunities. One thing that we're starting to discover, though, is that there's incredible neurodiversity in how these circuits are formed. Nearly all the children, by the time they reach pre-K, can speak and listen to syllables just fine, but when you look at the neural organization, some of these children have organized cortical circuitry in a way that sets them up beautifully for resilience and learning to read English. And others, for a whole bunch of different reasons, may have set up neural circuits that really set up challenges for learning. And these children are in profound need. They've got vulnerabilities. They're in profound need of supports, educational supports that can guide them through this process of transforming their brain to learn to read because of these differences. We can now bridge these two worlds of understanding the great neural diversity that shows up on the very first day of pre-K together with the world of transformations and scaffolds that help the teachers use to help kids onboard and guide these transformations. And we can also find great continuity through brain imaging and looking at brainwave technologies and pushing the technology to circuits of the earliest formation that's happening with children and get early warning signs of kids that might need extra help, as well as start to learn some of the powerful pro-social things that are actually building this resilience within kids. And we can see, even in the earliest, like 6 months of age, signals in the brain that are predictive of future challenges versus future successes in things like reading, and we can support those. So that's one reason why I'm deeply excited by this center. But there's a very, very different reason that they've asked me to come here and talk to you today, because it's not really about me. It's about me changing the way I do science fundamentally since coming to Stanford. It's about thinking about science not as something we do in a laboratory, but really coming to grips with this one profound truth. If early childhood learning, environments, and opportunities are actually transforming the human brain and mind, we can't study it in a lab. We've got to break the mold. We've got to now form a new way of doing science. We have to engage in community building with institutions, caregivers, parents, teachers, and schools. We have to break these silos and form new research practice partnerships. And so today, I'm mostly here just to introduce a panel of people that I've been working with, and they've been doing most of the most amazing work making these connections, and I've been coming along for the ride, of really forging a new relationship between science and education research. We've created something, we've co-constructed something that we call the Brainwave Learning Center at Synapse School, and I'd like to invite the members of Synapse School and the Brainwave Learning Center to come up on stage and to talk about, from their perspective, what happens when we do something kind of like what we're doing in the center, which is to really invite and create a community and work together not as a science in isolation, but a science through forming these groups. And one of the things that was great for starting this conversation when we first started working on this is I met Jim Eagen, and he was the head of school at Synapse. And we had these amazing conversations that were all over the place, really big blue sky conversations. And one of the themes that emerged was, you know, if we're going to try to really find some connection between education and brain science, we've got to get beyond this bell curve idea. There's so much research suggesting like, oh, I can place you on the bell curve on your abilities and also some brain correlates. And we can kind of learn these correlations, but that's not really driving a whole lot of exciting new possibilities. Instead, we have to move to something more like a focus on the learning curve. Could we take an individual child as they go from pre-K to K all the way up through 8th grade and participate and invite them into the process of watching their brain transform given these educational opportunities? And I wanted to invite Jim into the conversation. I'm only going to give you like 3 minutes, if that's rude of me. Usually I give you a lot more time when we talk. But
these people know that.
The big question is, like, you've heard from my perspective why this is a huge win for science. We can really start to open up new questions and tackle things in a brand new way, and we're already making multiple discoveries that I probably wouldn't have made if I just stayed in the lab. And I've been talking to the dean about these. They're just phenomenal. You're going to be like, wow, Bruce, who knew? You'll get a raise. But I want you guys to hear not from, why is this good for scientists? That's not what this center is for. Why is this good for our entire community of building research practice partnerships, of building communities of people where the researcher is playing one humble role, but the people that are driving it is this community of people that have a shared mission about what the heck are we doing? And how are we going to make a dent in some of the biggest problems in the world? So Jim, I have a question for you. From your perspective, what's the value add here? Like, you wasted 4 years talking to me. Like, was that crazy? Or was there some way which is valuable?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having us. I'm Jim Eagen, head of school, Synapse School. And, you know, I was thinking back to what Lisa Chamberlain said around we need a new approach. That's the approach that Synapse has taken to school. So when we founded the school, this is my 10th year. You're older than me. No. Yes, Katie here, lower school head, has been there 13 years. The school's 13 years old. But we wanted a new approach to education. We were founded on 3 pillars: social emotional learning, first and foremost, innovation, and leading edge academics. So we're trying to construct a school that is going to prepare kids for an unknown or sort of malleable future. And when I first got to the school, we talked a lot about the neuroscience of learning, and I was asking, okay, who are the neuroscientists that we work with, right? And they said, we're not working with anyone. So really just that's where it came from. And I reached out to a parent who's here, Sabrina Brahm, former parent at Synapse School, pediatrician extraordinaire, and we started having discussions about hooking up Synapse with a neuroscientist around this idea, wouldn't it be great to embed the researcher in the school? And it took time, right? Because that's not how schools function. That's not how researchers function. And after 4 years not wasted with Bruce, we put together this really novel, unique approach to the researcher-practitioner partnership. And I think the value add, as I see it, is that we are able to do things. We're in a privileged position as an independent school. We take our independence really seriously, that we have also a need to give back, a private school with a public purpose. And so what we're trying to do now is to be a beacon of innovation, but in this practice, hopefully what we're doing, those novel approaches, those experiments, to take that research and then expand it more broadly, right? Like, here's the beta test. Now what can we do? Where does this go? Where can Stanford take this further? How was that? Was that 3 minutes?
Yeah, that was perfect. Well done. And so Jim and I had created this thing, and then we had a really pivotal moment where we said we have to bring in somebody who's actually like a real bridge between education and education as it's lived inside of a complex innovation school and the fork cutting edge of neuroscience. And what are we discovering? What is at the base of our knowledge for how the brain is fundamentally changing, so that the editors and the reviewers of Nature and other groups can say this is the most rigorous science we can imagine, but it's actually happening in this incredibly messy school complex environment. So we had the good fortune of bringing on somebody onto the team, Liz Toomarian, who is actually Dr. Liz Toomarian. She graduated with a PhD in educational neuroscience from Wisconsin. And she came to us during a conference that we were talking about alternative pathways beyond the PhDs. Is that the only thing we can do is create more PhDs that go create labs? Or is there something more innovative you can do with it? And we hooked her up with Jim to talk about this opportunity. And Liz joined the team and helped create a laboratory with protocols as well as connections with teachers. And we were able to do something that really met the charge, which was we were able to see how kids are changing year by year, how their brain responses are changing for what we call symbol vision. So when kids look at symbols, they have a brain response, but if it's the kindergarten brain response is quite different from a first grade, second grade, a fluent third grader. We can watch this symbol vision respond over their head using this brainwave technology, measuring the voltage that their brain is producing over key parts of the brain, and then measuring how that's changing for these specific kids. Huge value gain for science. You've got the same kids, even though they went away for COVID and came back, to see how is each individual brain changing in the face of learning. And Liz did some amazing things. She brought the students in as part of the research team. And we have a research team of actual middle school children who present the science sometimes much better than I do. And she also helped us invent a question that we would have never asked ever. So the question that we wound up getting the most excited about, like, where's the highest energy question we could possibly ask this year? And Liz helped us invent this question, which is, how are 20 new ideas we're learning this week changing our future brain responses? What we learn in school every single week is fundamentally changing our brain, weaving new ideas and concepts into our brain, and we found a way to measure this. And we found a way to show the causal impact that learning has on the brains of first graders, second graders, third graders, fourth graders. And Liz, I just wonder, this isn't what you were expecting to do after getting your PhD. What is the value add of entering a community like this versus going off and creating your own lab and teaching 4 courses and then serving on a whole bunch of committees for a guy like Dan? And
Well, no disrespect to Dean Schwartz. I'm sure you love your job. My background is in educational neuroscience and thinking about educationally relevant questions and how could we answer them with neuroscience methods and thinking about neuroscience and cognitive science theories. And for much of that training, it was very divorced from the communities that we were studying, where you bring students into the lab and you spend an hour with them and you get their data, and hopefully it's a nice experience for them, and then you do it again and you do it again and you do it again, and you publish your research that way. And I think that there is a community of researchers that is really trying to change that approach. And so working at Synapse was really the dream possibility that I think researchers dream about. And it's funny to have Jim think about like, oh, well, we want to partner with neuroscientists and I want to partner with the school. And it was, I think you start to get a sense for how this became very much a mutually beneficial kind of setup where there's a lot that we have to offer each other, and that partnership, which is very much a theme that I think has come up multiple times today, has improved not just the research, but is changing the way that things are happening in the school, and that very much so the research is changing as a result as well. And so it's hopefully a start to a much longer, a more fruitful kind of endeavor.
This one point that you made about changing the way things are happening in a school, this is where the research gets incredibly challenging. I have no control over the question of how is this going to change the way things work in the school. It all depends on cooperation and amazing people that are heads of schools that are actually trying new things and collaborating with us. And so another key aspect of our community is Katie, who's been helping us actually change what's happening in the school. We can track what's happening with teachers, with students over time. We can collaborate with teachers about let's all get together to teach kids 20 new words that we picked out of a science database. They're only 1 per million, but they all have these amazing meanings, and we're going to learn them and integrate them into our brains. And we're going to take time out of class to go visit the Brainwave recording studio and record our brainwaves to see how did our brains change over those, absorbing those 20 words, weaving them into our neural networks, turning them into a part of how we imagine the world. So a lot of what's happening is that this weekly in situ dynamic, Katie's been able to work with her teachers as her leadership role to help them contribute to this process as authentic teachers, bring in their authentic teaching styles and ways of doing things, and then collaborate with us as researchers about how can we measure this? How can we come together to study this and learn about it and ask questions about it? And so the question I have for you, Katie, is the same one. Like, what's the value add? Like, I can't imagine your life as the head of a lower school. I have a hard time running a household of 2 kids in it. And then how on earth is this adding value to your job and your life to do this?
That's such an interesting question. And you know what's interesting? A lot of times kids will ask me what my job is, and I'll say, what do you think my job is? Because it's hard to define, and a big part of my job is really just helping others and operationalizing a lot of these big picture ideas. And so it's been really exciting for us as a school to have this partnership, because so much of what we do in education is driven by research, but having this direct access to thought partners, having this direct access to role models for our kids. We have scientists out on the playground doing duties, calling cars for pickup and building relationships with families and with kids. And I can't tell you the difference that makes for kids to be able to see themselves in these positions potentially in the future too. So I think that's incredibly powerful. The value add there really is in the relationships and kids being able to see themselves in the future and see themselves participating in these projects and this research. I think for teachers, there's also this aspect of professional development and getting to join this interdisciplinary team that you were just talking about, Bruce, and feeling like they have an impact outside of their classroom and outside of the school environment. Not only are they participating in this research, but Liz and Radhika do a wonderful job of bringing them into the co-creation process of asking, like, what is relevant here? What do we want to get out of this? What do we want to see the data for? And then what teachers get on the other side of that is get to see the results of that research. They get to see the results of this magic word study that was done, the 20 vocabulary words in this 2-week sprint. What does that look like over time for kids to remember and bring their knowledge back into the conversation months later? And kids are excited, parents are excited, leadership, teachers are excited. And I could talk about that a lot, actually, but I'll pause there because I know we have a teacher with us who will talk about some of that.
And this is, I think, we saved Adam for last because this is the question that I think is really at the heart of what we're trying to do. So in our vision as brain scientists, there's this amazing transformation happening wide scale across the brain. All of these systems are becoming integrated in these profound new ways that, as you saw in Sean Reardon's work, has a profound impact on their entire lifelong trajectory. And we have come to start to understand that this is not a process of maturation. This is a process of scaffolding, of relationship building, of trust, of continual hard work, week by week dynamics. And at the center of that are these amazing people, these kindergarten teachers. And we would love to find ways in which we can add value to what they are doing and actually elevate what they're doing. They are helping to transform the minds and brains of the future generation. And in the trenches every day is Adam. And you are also at this crucial hub with what these folks and what this center is about, which is really understanding the dynamics and diversity and opportunities of early childhood learning. So the kids who show up in your kindergarten class are incredibly diverse in all these kind of ways, and your job is to sometimes adapt to that and to lead that, but also to corral them towards some kind of shared group understanding. How do you do all that in the context of what your crazy boss did, of like building a Brainwave learning center in the middle of your school and saying your kids are now going to like get their brainwaves measured as they're learning, and they're going to do it every year from kindergarten to 8th grade, and they have all these conversations about what do you think about your brain, and like, what, 80 billion neurons, that's a lot, right? Like, what is it from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Bruce, you talked about the win for researchers and the win for science, but it's absolutely been a win for me, and it's been a win for us teachers as well. I think having the BLC and having Liz and Radhika around has just provided this additional framework for us to talk about learning with our students, with our families. And it affirms a lot of the stuff that we're doing as a school, like Jim talked about. And I think approaches to literacy, right? When I'm talking to families about literacy in kindergarten, I bring up what we've learned in the BLC and share that as an opportunity for us to continue this process. Another thing that I think about often that happens all the time every day is how the partnership and what we're learning is affirming what we know about SEL. And I was thinking about this because I was talking with 2 students yesterday, disagreement, we'll call it, on the playground, and we sat down, we were talking, and suddenly we started talking about our brains, and we started talking about zones of regulation. And so we're able to tie all these things back, and we talk about learning as just growing your brain. So it's really changed the language that we've used in our classrooms with all of the constituents that we work with. And then the last piece, and Katie, you touched on this, is the professional development piece. I never thought when I became a teacher that I would be sitting and talking about lesson planning with 2 neuroscientists. And it's been amazing to learn more about how the brain works, and it's been amazing to do PD with all of our staff. And it's been an absolute pleasure and a total win for everybody in the teaching teams.
And I have to jump in and say that I don't think I thought that my job would include having my coworker be a teacher too. And I think it was like this pipe dream that has become a reality. And I think that it's only after doing this for a few years that you can start to see all of the benefits that come from it that we couldn't have even imagined when we started this. So it's definitely mutual.
And we look forward to making multiple partnerships with the people in this room, as Stanford has made this major commitment to put early childhood learning at the center of what we do and trying to make benefits for humanity and human learning. And so this is just the opening of a conversation. I think we have a little bit, 6 minutes left. I'm going to invite Dan Schwartz up on the stage to moderate and point out and try to get some discussion going in our final 6 minutes. Yeah. You get to tell me what to do, but today.
Staying on our toes.
The funny part of that, Bruce, is you can tell me what to do today, but I do your salary tomorrow.
I know. That's why I said today.
So do people have questions about what in the hell are you doing?
Hello? Oh, hi. Yes, I have a question for Adam. I wanted to hear how that altercation in the playground sort of went down. Like, what was that conversation like? Because I can imagine the value add of that you're empowering children to understand themselves, to give them metacognition and sort of, that must be empowering them for them to be able to sort of recognize or become aware of the emotions that they're feeling, gives them that critical distance from being consumed at an age when maybe, or many of us still are consumed when we feel like anger or sadness, whatever. So I just wanted to hear how that conversation went. How did you facilitate it? Like, what happened?
Yes, so one of the first things I talk about with my class every year is about the BLC, and Liz and Radhika come in, and so from the beginning of the year we're talking about this. And when we first got this thing going, I came in to the studio and I put the net on and I tried to get my brainwaves to calm down, and I was really nervous. And I tell this story to students to talk about the zones of regulation, like I was saying, I was sitting in this space, I was nervous in a heightened state, my brainwaves were all over the place, and I have pictures that I show them. And then I also have pictures that I show them for like a second, where I was able to just sort of relax. And so having that linked with zones of regulation, which we talk about all the time in SEL, that's how we were able to resolve it, and sort of calling back to something that we've been talking about for weeks and weeks.
So cool.
So when you go home and with a relationship and you get in a fight, you say, no, it's just this region.
My amygdala, my prefrontal cortex
never
didn't
mind.
inhibit my amygdala.
No comment, no comment.
Smart.
Wonderful stuff. And I've done work in school settings. And one of the challenges sometimes, and I'm curious how you're working it out, is how do you create your comparison group? Because I saw what you and change it, and we all know, you know, do you typically do it by having something happen in one classroom and not another, and then switch it? I mean, how do you, and are the kids learning about the scientific method as you're going along?
I want to nominate Liz. She came up with a great way of doing this.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this is just with clever scientific design. We certainly talk about the scientific method, and as we sort of started to allude to, we try to include the students as partners in this as much as possible as well. It's to use an example from what we've referred to as the magic word study. We had different classrooms sort of serve as the comparison groups for each other. And so we had, for example, 2 weeks of a sprint where they had to learn a list of novel words that they'd never heard before but are in fact real words. And each class had a different set. And we, again, brought them on as partners, and it sort of became this game of, this is your list, don't tell anyone else about this. And the next class had the same sort of thing. And again, it was sort of gamifying. It became social, very much a social activity. The teachers were the leaders of that, the sprint. And so in that case, it was essentially looking at classes compared against each other. So that's one example of a way that we are able to ask these specific questions within one school environment.
And just to geek on the science. Right. But just to geek out a little bit on the science, one of the coolest things that's happened is that if you put these words in a long chain where it's like class 1, class 2, class 3, and you have all the kids go through it, some of the kids will show a huge brain response on class list 1, and then very little brain response on 2 and 3, and we can say, I bet you're in class 1. And it's like we read their mind from their brain waves. And so that design where the kids in class 2 are showing an increased spike in word 2 less than kids in class 3, the kids we're looking at each kid against their own response to words they've never seen in their life versus words that they've been studying and integrating. But even cooler, Radhika Gosavi and Liz got together almost like without my being involved. I heard about it as it was happening, a really exciting idea to say, what happens 100 days later and 300 days later? Did the way in which there was all this social emotional learning around this words and this excitement and this brainwave leave traces that we could pick up 100 days later, even though we never talk about it anymore, or 300 days later? And they found that there were dynamics in which some aspects were completely lost. If you just ask the kids to free recall the words that drop down out of memory, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday. Well, maybe I do. But then when you look at just priming or semantic associations or things, super clear evidence that these words were deeply embedded in their semantic networks and almost no loss of forgetting in our metrics. And to have a dialogue with that about the teachers, like that teaching that you did, you worked really, really hard for those 2 weeks. 300 days later, we can see in the semantic networks of these children, the ideas that they learned during those weeks are still part of the fabric of their mind.
Bring us home.
I was wondering if you could talk about multilingual learners in your school and in your program.
Yeah.
Just thinking about like what you're learning, neuroscience has really helped, I think, bring a breath of fresh air to what has been a politically fraught issue, including in the state around, bilingual education. And so
This is something I care deeply about, because the more I learn about the neuroscience, the more I start to see this is an issue of equity and access. So the ideal way of preparing your phonology to learn all of the nuances of English orthography turns out to be speaking mainstream English dialect with your parents and your whole life. And if you optimize your brain to speak 3 other languages, and then you try to break into English orthography and reprogram your brain for that, there's an incredible disadvantage unless the school's helping you to adapt to that particular challenge. And I think what our schools have done is finding ways that work pretty well for most kids who have optimized their brains in early childhood for mainstream English speaking and phonology and semantics and all of these things and these nuances. It's not a far jump to master English orthography, but all these other forms of diversity of human language, which are really healthy, adaptive, amazing ways of tuning your brain, are not all that well adapted to this particular challenge. So I think it's really upon us to adapt to these challenges of what's coming in the door. How have kids optimized their phonology and their language circuitry during their lifetime? And then how do we jump from that to integrating this new challenge of mastering English orthography, which is one of the most tricky, deep, kind of sneaky orthographies that there is on the planet.
All right. That was great. Raises for everybody.
Oh,
Well, and I might just say that we luckily got Adam out of school for the rest of the day, and Katie and Jim have been very generous to be here. So I know this felt so short, but I hope that we can continue the conversation. We'll be here. That was all I was saying.